There isn't a lot to discuss when it comes to Gem Trail, with it having more stakes than the last episode, but at the same time, it's mainly drilling to the center of the earth. And to tell you the truth, drilling to the center of the earth is somewhat promising when it comes to the elements that comes during the journey. And the only journey that we see is the muted gems attacking Steven and Peridot, which is really risk taking when it comes to the stakes of these two trying to stop the cluster from destroying the Earth. But if this episode was 22 minutes rather than 11 minutes, I don't think it would work out, considering that the one time of this 11-minute episode is honestly paced out the way it is. Besides, I honestly felt like that Steven's feelings towards the fusion mutants is honestly what I actually needed and not need full details. Because when Steven and Peridot reach to the center of the earth where the cluster is at, Steven is somewhat aware that the cluster doesn't know what it's doing. Similar to the mutant gems, the cluster has hands of its own, which is mostly out of control, considering that the cluster itself is having so much problems into listening to multiple things at once, knowing full well that it's been spending its eternity in the center of the earth rather than the outside of the earth. Peridot instantly tries to destroy it, but at the same time there was nothing else that she can do due to how indestructible the cluster is, and it's not doing what she wanted it to do. Really shows how unpredictable this whole mission is in comparison to the last episode centering around the crystal gems trying to stop Malachite from causing more havoc once it was released. Steven is really dealing with so much going on with the amount of gems that he's been seeing all around the drill itself, which leads to him being unconscious, and this leads to him talking to the cluster. And with the gems all around him, he manages to talk to them just like the cluster. And to tell you the truth, with the mutant gems forming inside the cluster, it really feels like that they actually have a mind of their own, but unfortunately they can't be able to be heard due to them being trapped inside of a forced fusion. I'm gonna be really real with you that whenever I think about this sequence alone, it kind of feels like that before Steven went unconscious, this is technically his first panic attack before the epilogue, well, his trauma got the better of him. I mean, if you really think about it, for how that Steven is being in this position that is a lot more severe of how that he's talking to the cluster with multiple gems forming into the cluster that shouldn't be the case, I can guarantee you that Steven literally made a huge sacrifice when it comes to him willing to save the entire planet, all just by talking to the cluster itself. All the while bubbling it huge in comparison to bubbling small objects. Keep this in mind, he had to deal with so many mutant gems separated, and when they come together, it's honestly difficult for him to actually do all of it in a short amount of time when the Earth is about to be destroyed by the cluster. Like, for how Steven handled this situation, I can't imagine what Twilight Sparkle would have done if she would have done similar to what Steven did in this episode. Granted, there's no such thing as mutant ponies when it comes to My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, aside from dreams, but at the same time, you can really tell that this situation was a lot more complicated and intense, knowing how that Steven did the impossible, that his powers really show that he is one of the most powerful characters in the show, even if he may be OP. The stakes in this episode was a lot more intense than the last episode, which is really saying something to the fact that they're really making the cluster a huge situation and obstacle that Steven needs to deal with. And since that Peridot can't be able to succeed on her plan on using the drill to stop the cluster, it really shows that Steven is literally the answer to everything when it comes to these situations. This is one of the episodes that I will never get tired of upon rewatching it multiple times, because of the stakes being huger than the last episode, with Steven talking to the cluster in his unconsciousness, all the while reaching to a conclusion that was a lot more satisfying in comparison to the conclusion of the last episode. Gem Trail really has it all, which is really saying something that I didn't have a lot to say when it comes to the first half of the episode. The second half really made the episode a lot more memorable. Granted, I question how the Earth is turned back to normal after Steven and Peridot go back to the surface with no cracks whatsoever, but I'm gonna be real with you, if this episode was 22 minutes, we will probably have an extended scene of the Earth repairing itself, but at the same time, I'm pretty sure that the runtime of the 11-minute episode was really the best of what they can offer. I really enjoyed these two episodes, with it being the second favorite of the premieres from this show. I'll describe into detail onto why I enjoyed the premiere of Season 5, since that it has 4 or 5 episodes being the premiere, but for now, I'm thankful that I finally gave out my thoughts on this premiere, since that we're getting into the episodes that I'm looking forward to talk about. I'm giving this episode a 9.5 out of 10.